Max Simon, thank you for joining me on an episode of the Potcast.
Good to be with you.
Yes, Max is the CEO and co-founder of Greenflower, and they are the worldwide leader in cannabis education. And as someone who is your cannabis lifestyle guide, you know how important education is. And so I love what Max Simon and his team have been doing at Greenflower, both for personal education, enterprise education, and now higher education. And no pun intended this time.
Yeah, it's funny. Like I always have to write like, no, I'm serious. It's really higher education, like colleges, universities.
Exactly. But I love that so much because I mean, puns just fly out of my mouth all of the time. So I was like, oh, this is a great one. I can't wait to name this podcast.
Yeah, right. Well, I'm into it.
Yeah. So Max, tell me a little bit about your life before Greenflower. You worked with the mind body medicine guru Deepak Chopra, and I feel like that just was like a staircase up to your life now in cannabis. So, what was that like?
Yeah, it was cool. I started there in the beginning of 2003, and I was there for, just about eight and a half years or so. And it was a cool time because, it was really when Deepak was coming into like full magnificence, and his, he's really getting a lot of attention and being on Oprah and all these things. And, we had such a core mission to help the world understand meditation and mind body medicine and kind of natural wellness. And it was really cool because when we started, meditation was very kooky out in the world, highly stigmatized, not something that people really thought was acceptable. It was kind of a fringe thing. And through the work we did, we really educated the masses on the value and benefits of these tools. And, now like we're 20 years later or so, but now the world meditates. Now the world practices yoga. Now the world is really engaged in all the things that we were seeing. And so it was really amazing to see how you could, deliver messages at the right time in a way that really helped people understand it and then it take hold. And so, yeah, it does feel very synchronous to cannabis, and just knowing that we will achieve the mission, the one thing that everybody's out to do of like getting the world to understand the value and benefits of this and actualizing the potential, it will happen. I have complete certainty, you just got to kind of go through the layers of it. So I worked with him for a long time, and we did a lot of great things. And then I went from there and, did some my own business stuff. And then I founded Greenflower in 2014. And that's been all consuming and everything I've been thinking and dreaming about for the last 6 years.
Absolutely. And what I love about it is that your work with Deepak and the Chopra Center and, the programs that you sent up, I was doing those programs. I was doing those meditation series, and those things became tools in my wellness toolkit that I was already a cannabis user. I've been using cannabis for, low level anxiety that just kind of sits on me all the time for years and years. And when I started doing the meditation, I realized like pairing the cannabis with my meditation created a whole more expansive experience for me. And so, I was part of that, the woo woo thing, like, what is this all about? And, creating a practice of it, and then taking that and now seeing that cannabis is at that same place where like, oh yeah, it's a panacea. It fixes everything. And where we are having to slowly educate people, but by bringing them on board and sharing these personal experiences of how cannabis helps and shapes lives, I think that's really the piece that's moving the needle faster. So I know you're a medical cannabis user. Tell me what your experience with cannabis is.
Yeah, I'll tell you, when we were at Chopra, we taught, hundreds of thousands of people meditation. And the thing that was so, challenging about meditation is that, it does take a little while, oftentimes a few weeks to get good at it, if you will, to where you start seeing some benefits. Because when you first start meditating, your mind is just like driving you nuts, And so, we needed to tell people with meditation, like you need a good consistent set of practices to see the value. Cannabis, my mom takes a tincture and she sleeps that night. And so, that's why I think actually cannabis has so much potential in even contrast to those things, is that it's so kind of profoundly valuable and effective so quickly. And most people are just so kind of unaware of that in the world. Or not only unaware of it, they have a reverse stigma. They actually think this is bad for you, something that they're kind of scared of. And so it's an interesting thing. I actually, we started in 2014 with Green Flower, and it feels like a different planet between 2014 and 2020. When I started and told people I was going into cannabis education, like, my people were horrified, like so, upset, and now in 2020, like all those same people are not only using cannabis, but like the whole ecosystem has shifted so dramatically in terms of adoption, and change is happening so fast. So, again, I have this perspective where it took us many decades to get mind-body medicine to kind of take hold and, become something that people thought was valuable and get on board with, and the industry to expand. And cannabis is just like right now. So, I don't know what the other question was, but I just wanted to talk about that kind of differences, because there's definitely some acceleration that's happening in cannabis that didn't actually happen back then in the mind-body medicine stuff.
Yeah, I'll remind you of the question in a second, but I want to add on top of that. So the fact that your mom took a tincture, she immediately has a good night's sleep and a good experience. The fine line between that good experience and a bad experience is that education gap that we're filling.
Yeah.
But if you don't know what you're doing, you can have a really bad experience.
Really bad.
You're in that camp that thinks cannabis is bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, I often joke around that if cannabis was if the species Cannabis sativa was discovered today, if like scientist was like walking through the forest and they found this plant and they brought it back, it would make the cover of Time magazine instantly. It would be the most celebrated botanical species on planet Earth, just like that, because this thing produces hundreds of different compounds naturally. Those compounds have this enormous abundance of different properties that work on the system. It grows extremely fast. It has regenerative properties to the soil. It's used to treat hundreds of different conditions. Like, the world would go like, this is amazing. But because we have this weird history from it, it's super demonized. And so what I always talk about is cannabis as a plant is a very, very powerful thing. You have to learn to respect this thing. And unfortunately, that's also something that needs to be re-educated. Because since it was pushed so underground, you had such a kind of a heavy, almost like a shadow-like consumer a lot of times. And so that's also needs to be educated properly. But powerful plant. It's a very powerful plant. We have to learn to respect this plant. And that's, definitely where education comes in.
Absolutely. So tell me what your medical uses for cannabis are.
Oh, right. So I've been using for ADHD for decades. I had really severe ADHD when I was a kid, like, incredibly disruptive. In fact, one of my only teachers that ever got me in middle school just followed up with me a little while ago and said, I'm so happy that you did well in life. She said, she's like, you were a tough one in school. So severely kind of disabled from that kind of perspective. And I found cannabis really young. What's that?
Did your parents have you on medication?
So my parents were both very natural medicine people, but the truth is, the real actually hindsight is they kind of just didn't take it that seriously. Like the fact that I had this thing, I was recommended Ritalin, I was recommended Adderall. I took them for periods of time. I took other things as well. But it never worked. And they were just kind of like, well, don't, if it doesn't work for you, don't worry about it. And so I kind of was just largely untreated for most of my life, which was fine. I learned a lot, but I found cannabis.
Well, now as a parent, your children or your child is young, you have another one on the way, but if something happens and your child has ADHD, knowing what you know now about cannabis, what kind of decisions, or what do you recommend to parents who are
I would do it as a first line. Absolutely. 100%. So that's my point. Like, I found cannabis when I was in my teens. I can vividly remember from my brain the first time I consumed, I remember having the thought, oh, I bet you this is what normal people feel like.
Wow.
And so I consumed cannabis, but was so closeted about it up until my 30s, but consumed cannabis basically from 12 all the way to my 30s. And then when I was just about to start Green Flower, what really compelled me is I started looking around trying to find more kind of credible guidance around this whole thing. I couldn't find anything anywhere. But the research that was out there, the people that was out there, the real credibility that existed just wasn't packaged right, was there. And as I learned more about it, I've just leaned so much more deeply now into being a, very pure medical consumer, if you will, for ADHD. And it's been game changing for me. It's changed everything in my life. So I'm a personal advocate as much as anything in this space.
I love it. And I feel like that's so much, educators, we're passionate about it because we are consumers. So, you took what you learned with creating the Chopra Center and working with Deepak and team and your own personal relationship with cannabis to create Green Flower, which in the beginning, whenever I was first looking at it, it was online education for my personal knowledge, for me as a consumer. And it has evolved significantly since then. So let's talk about, kind of the new Green Flower.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately what started happening is we realized that, people really wanted deep training. there was a lot of there was a lot of kind of intermittent consumer attention for little stuff, but where we were finding where people were really leaning into Green Flower and where we felt like our kind of greatest impact it would make, it would really came into like, let's really train people seriously, and let's make this an industry where those people go out in the world and really can have a big impact. And so we just started in 2018 transitioning more and more into being a training company, more deeply into a training company. And now it's evolved in this really amazing way where there's the website, which has, all these online programs that people can take in every facet of the industry, but they're so beautifully produced and they're very rigorously curated and they're extremely valuable. And so there's this whole range of kind of online education for individual people. And that's used from everything from medical professionals to medical patients to jobs and career seekers to, like my mom learned to grow cannabis from the website,
Yes.
And so there's all people that use it as like step-by-step training, validated, trustworthy guidance to kind of go through these different sectors. And it covers everything. We have these medical learning centers that cover all the sides of using cannabis as a patient or as a medical provider. We have the cultivation side and teaching people how to grow indoor, outdoor. Then we have the whole policy and compliance side, and that covers the kind of regulatory frameworks, that touches the history of cannabis in terms of the laws and the policies. It understands all, goes all the way down to the local level and talks about licensing. And it's really kind of a whole program for people in the legal, professional, compliance side. And then we have this very ever expanding business landscape where people can learn about every sector of the cannabis industry, from hemp to manufacturing. We've got 30 hours on extraction-based materials. So it's just cool. I mean, it keeps getting cooler. Like, I'm really excited about what it's become because there's so many pathways for people to kind of lean into on Green Flower now. And it's, in contrast to anything else, it's so affordable out there to really get trustworthy guidance that helps people succeed in cannabis. That's kind of our mantra at Green Flower, is to help people succeed in cannabis. And so we took all that and then we started approaching schools, universities to power some of their curriculums. And I think this has actually been one of the great things about the pandemic for education is all these institutions around the country now had, this huge fallout. And they were really all of a sudden needing to find new ways to serve students and to expand. And, schools cost a ton of money to run. And so they started opening up to cannabis education almost overnight. And so we had one school in the beginning of 2020 and we ended 2020 with 9. And so we're now powering the cannabis curriculums of University, California, Riverside. We're powering the programs of Northern Michigan University, of Florida Atlantic University, of Northwest Missouri State University, of Mount Aloysius University, of University of San Diego. We're just about to announce 2 more amazing schools that we've signed recently. And so in those higher education landscapes, we have, programs that are accredited by the college that are in agriculture, cannabis agriculture, cannabis business, cannabis medicine, and then cannabis policy. And those programs are 6-month programs with live instructors that you go through and you create special projects. And I think the coolest thing about that particular universe is that we've also created all these relationships with companies like Cookies and Jushi and Parallel and, these larger companies, and they're hiring the graduates. They're kind of taking those graduates and hiring them up into their ecosystem. So we've got this kind of unique business where we touch, consumers, we touch the higher education institution, and then our third part of the business is we train the employees inside of cannabis companies. And we've got this whole relationship and ecosystem where a cannabis company can essentially unlock our whole library as a training tool for them internally. And so we're starting to become the training arm of many of these larger MSOs, maybe the larger retail companies, many larger manufacturers, because we have kind of A to Z platform now for, onboarding their people and compliance training and safety training and skills training. And, it's this cool ecosystem. So it's a really fun business, and it's taken a lot of work to build, and it's been hard and challenging for sure. I mean, I've never worked as hard in my whole life, but it is a really cool thing that we've been able to create.
Yeah, I feel that a lot. Working in cannabis, it takes some real fortitude to stick with it because there's a hurdle all the time. But the thing that I really love about Green Flower and how the company has evolved is, I'm one of those people that my mission in life is to inspire other people to figure out how to get paid to be themselves. And there's so many people that would love to be in the cannabis space, but they don't know how to make that leap. They don't have the connection. They don't have the education. And so, there's not like a start here, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 kind of a roadmap when it comes to cannabis. You're really just like, okay, what skill set do I need here? What do I need here?
Yeah.
And, it's almost like there's this giant recipe box of educational tools that you can just pull out and learn exactly what you need to succeed in your own way.
Yeah. I mean, what makes cannabis so amazing, but also so difficult is that, first off, it's like, there's such crazy demand for the product. Like that's one of the things that's just uniquely special to cannabis is, I learned this from Steve D'Angelo. He said, cannabis is like water. It'll always find its way to the people. And he's right. Like, cannabis is one of those products that you fall in love with. And some people don't, right? Like, some people have bad experiences for sure, but the majority of people that actually do consume cannabis, they fall in love with it. So you have a product that's in a huge demand that's been gated up. It's been all kind of tied up by, illegality, basically, so that's all crumbling in all sorts of different ways. But as that's crumbling, it's creating this wave of opportunity. But the only problem is that in every single place where there is that opportunity, there's also like customized stuff to that individual landscape. So the rules in California are different than the rules in Nevada, and they're different than the blah, 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 blah. But then it goes, the rules in Los Angeles are different than the rules in Santa Barbara. And then, and so the great thing about cannabis is that if you can actually get a good foundation of education, you'll realize there is more opportunity than you've ever seen in your life because of how fast everything is growing. Mm-hmm. But you also need to get really specialized, and you need to decide within this huge, like ever growing thing, where am I going to kind of cut my teeth? And so, that's why we've kind of broken it down into these 4 categories. We've learned that there's kind of 4, but then there's subsets of all of them. There's the kind of, do you want to be in the business of cannabis, right? When that's about licensing and marketing and branding and strategy and, and compliance, that's all kind of in that category. Or do you want to grow the plant, right? Do you want to get your hands on growing and cultivation? But that's also processing, and that also goes into, storage, and it goes into manufacturing. And so there's this whole kind of agriculture manufacturing sector that you can go into. And then, from there, it starts to go into all the ancillary services where you can start to go into like, marketing or PR or legal or financial, or, there's all the services that serve in the industry. And so within every one of those sectors, there's this huge, enormous, like ever growing opportunity, but people need to know where they want to go. You need to decide, this is where I kind of want to go into. And in that, then there's just, a ton of opportunity for people that are well educated and trained.
Yeah. When you were saying all that, I was visualizing, one of those old school, they put you in the phone booth and they turn on the wind and the money's flying around and you're just like trying to grab as much as you can. I mean, that's how, if you don't stay focused in the cannabis space, that's how you're going to
It's brutal.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I know that, like, people hear me speak now and it just seems like, oh, this has all been so like easy and fun. And like, you're having such, but like, dude, those first really like 4 or 5 years is the most difficult thing I've ever done, because we also weren't super focused in any one direction, or, we're taking all these different cues, and it took years for us to get to a place of really getting clear, like, this is what we do. This is not what we do.
Yeah.
This is where we're going with it. This is how we're going to operate it. And that's, 6 years of ruthless focus and attention and money and mistakes. And, it's been really challenging. So it's hard. It's a hard space. It's a hard space for sure. But, I also love it. I mean, you got to kind of love being in this space as well.
Absolutely. And cannabis is now the fastest growing job sector in the United States. So from your vantage point, what are you seeing as like the hottest job sectors within cannabis?
I mean, again, the truth is, I think there's tremendous opportunity in all the sectors. I really genuinely believe that, because on every side of the coin, there's demand for services and product. It's more about getting out of the indecision and then going into a certain space, right? I mean, I just like, I know all of the companies that are just, they can't hire fast enough, but it's not because they have a bazillion jobs. It's because they're trying to find people that actually know what they're talking about. There's a ton of people that want to get in. There's a lot of demand, but there's very little good supply of talent that knows what they're doing, right? That can step into this and actually understands, all the things. And so people just need to get educated. That's what I get. It's like, there's so much opportunity there if you can pick a focus and then really get thoroughly educated, because then you stand out amongst all the people. There's so much intent to get in, but not a lot of trained people that actually know what they're talking about,
Amen. That is so true. And, it's the know what you're talking about. And then, if you truly do find a space in cannabis where your existing skill set is relevant, and then you also have the chops, I mean, come on, like you're a shoe-in.
I mean, we're like I said, as part of this employer network, we have all the relationships with a lot of the big, MSOs and the companies and dude, they're hiring so many people this coming, in 2021. It's going to be nuts how many people they're planning to hire next year, and so there's a ton of opportunity, but most of these people, they're only now starting to use green flower as their training arm. Right. So like, they're not starting from this big background of having a training infrastructure and, all these resources to make sure people are well educated and know their craft and know the skills and know compliance. And so that's the problem, is that they want people that come in knowing something, got some chops underneath them. But if you have that, it's like so much opportunity.
Absolutely agree. So let's talk a little bit about the enterprise arm of the business. So the kinds of businesses that come to you, kind of what's that process? Are you shaping the curriculum specifically for them, or is it a package deal? Like, how's that work?
Yeah. I mean, first off, I'll say that, this is only something we've been doing for the last 6 months. And so it's really developing right now, which is fun. We've got about 50 or so clients that we work with right now, and it's about 50% retail. And then it's about 25% cultivation and manufacturing. And then it's 25% everything else. So a lot of retail, some cultivation and manufacturing, and then, like ancillary companies, like we work with some law firms and we work with some accounting companies. And essentially, what we realized is that there's all these pathways that are important in cannabis, compliance pathway, there's a finance pathway, there's a science pathway, a cannabinoid pathway, a product pathway. There's these kind of pathways of subjects that are important for people in the cannabis world to understand. And so the cool thing about the current state of this enterprise business is we connect with these companies, we find out what are all the pathways that they need inside of their specific organization. And then we put together those pathways based upon the content we've got in the library. And also if they have content that they want to like blend in there, we kind of add them in. And so you create all these kind of, we call them job pathways throughout the whole organization that have different levels, level 1, level 2, level 3. And that way it allows you to kind of have this company-wide training platform that everybody can go through in a customized way, and that kind of tracks the progress. So they have levels where they can kind of, go into those greater levels of depth. And we're implementing those across the companies in all of these different sectors, because we have manufacturing content and cultivation content and compliance content and safety content. And so it just kind of covers the organization. So it's pretty cool. It's definitely been exciting. And again, it really fulfills our mission, because we want the cannabis industry to be successful. And that includes making people have a successful experience with cannabis. And so for us to empower these companies with the knowledge and the wisdom that really makes them, serve clients better, operate in better compliance, have better quality control standards, all that stuff, it like fits so perfectly into our mission. So I'm quite excited about that channel, even though it's a little bit newer, because it's showing so much promise in terms of real impact,
Well, and I appreciated hearing that 50% of your clients right now are the retailers, because
Yeah.
there's so much turnover with bud tenders that if you go in as a consumer, it's really, if you don't know your shit,
Disheartening.
yeah, then you don't know that you're getting bad information.
Yeah.
And I have some listeners that tell me they've gone into a dispensary and they're like, now I know that I know more than my bud tender. And so,
Terrible.
it is terrible. And so
Terrible.
I'd
I mean,
like,
this was the real motivation behind Ganjier. I don't know when you want to talk about that, but that was where Ganjier started as an idea. What, you want to talk about it?
well, yeah, I mean, I'm super excited about it. Ganjier, the Sommelier cannabis certification program, that just kicked off in fourth quarter.
Not even launched yet. It launches. We're letting the first round of applications in, next week. And so here's, what happened was we were definitely saying, look, within the realm of cannabis service, which happens mostly in retail right now, right? It is mostly the bud tender who's interacting with consumers and recommending things and that whole thing. But it happens in a lot of other places as well. It happens online in digital, right? Where we're interacting with consumers in a digital environment. It happens in the marketing domain of how we communicate. It happens at events. It happens at experiences. And within that ecosystem of service, it just became painful. It became painful how much misinformation and lack of good information and bad service was happening in the space. And so we started to socialize this concept with this group of people that became the Ganjier Council. But these are the people that have been in cannabis for decades, and these are people that have been in cannabis for decades, but transitioned into the legal market as well. And because I say these things, I know there's a lot of legends that have been in cannabis for many decades, but they just stayed underground. They didn't move into the new marketplace, and we play in the regulated space. So we worked with this council and we said, this is a problem of bad service that really needs to be tackled seriously. This is something that's really important to cannabis, being adopted well is that the people that are providing that service become really educated and well trained. So, as we looked at other sectors that do this, it became really clear. There was wine sommeliers, there's beer cicerones, there's cigars cicerones, there's these industries that have created standardized trainings developed around cannabis service.
Yeah, and showcasing the craftsmanship of the growing. And let's do a little name dropping, because I know quite a few of the people that are on this council that have you've worked with to create this program and who are teaching it, and they're second and third generation farmers and hashish experts. And so
600 years of cannabis experience. This 18 people they have over 600 years between 18 of them. So it's Frenchy Cannoli, who's considered kind of the preeminent hash maker in the States, especially. It's Kevin Jodrey, who's one of the most legacy cultivators out of Northern California, kind of propagated CBD clones throughout California back in the early 90s. It's Mel Frank, who wrote the Marijuana Growers Bible. It's it's Swami Chaitanya, who runs Swami Selects, and Nikki, who's his partner. It really just keeps going down and down and down the list of incredible people. And they have contributed over the last, we're almost at 3 years. So we started in the beginning of 2018. This has been in development for almost 3 solid years now. It's crazy to say because we're at the end of the year now. 3 solid years now, yeah. They've contributed 8,000 hours of time into shaping this program. And it's designed to really make you a master of cannabis service. And that comes into, really thorough, proper understanding of cannabis, like really thorough. It's the most thorough cannabis training that's probably ever been done in terms of like fundamentally understanding cannabis products, the cannabis plant, cannabis history, cannabis science, right? So there's a very rigorous kind of foundational understanding. Then the second part is around quality. And so we actually built a whole standard of assessment called the Systematic Assessment Protocol that's designed to create a standardized understanding of cannabis quality. So we go through in both flower and concentrates, the 4 categories. There's the category of appearance, there's the category of aroma, there's the category of taste, and then there's the category of direct experience. So each of those categories has layers of gradation systems now that have been baked in terms of this systematic assessment protocol. So like, for example, in the visual category, you assess things like trichome density, right? The amount of trichomes on the plant. You assess trichome ripeness, the maturity of those trichomes, right? And then you go into, the cure properties. You go into the trim properties. You go into, all these different categories of nuances throughout each layer of the product to create an assessment. So first, you're learning all the assessment methodologies, because within all of that stuff, there's a lot of education. And then we actually created a tool that you can use to develop your assessment palette, because you're also now assessing the flavor and the smells of cannabis using both science as well as this flavor wheel that we developed. And so that's the second layer, right? Is the assessment of quality. And we did this for both flower and concentrates. So it goes through 2 different assessments, one through flower and one through concentrates, using this assessment protocol. And the third was the service side. And so we developed the customer interaction protocol, which is a way in which we're standardizing cannabis service in terms of how you talk to people, how you speak about the products, the correct lexicon that you use, the way you work with new people versus more experienced people, the way you guide them to correct products. And there's a whole methodology that we've essentially baked into cannabis service. And so the 3 of those pieces together is what makes the Certified Ganjier program.
I love this so much. I'm just sitting here grinning. I'm like, this is the most fun, nerdy thing we can do with cannabis. But it's
ever.
I would like to be able to develop my nose better, and I would love to learn to study the concentrates. I mean, that's really hard to do because, there's so many different styles of the concentrates. And which one is better. And,
And the only people that really understand these things are the people that have been doing it for decades. Like I'll tell you, that's been some of the greatest, like most interesting place of learning for me too, is I didn't have a ton of concentrate knowledge. And I still feel like, just for the record, I have a lot to learn there. But watching Frenchie, watching Nick Tannum, who created the first regulated hash company in the United States, watching some of these guys, really watching Patrick King, who runs the Soil King manufacturing up in Northern California, watching them really get super geeky into all of these, extraction processes and processes of making these products. You really see there's so much to learn, but it's so interesting and so fascinating.
Well, and for, someone saying, why does this matter? We don't want the art of cannabis and like the history of the way it was grown when people truly cared about it. Because when you're having to do something underground, you truly are a master of your craft. And now the fact that we have, giant companies that can come and, create huge fields full of cannabis and basically, package them up and sell them like cigarettes at Walmart, we're going to lose the legend and the mystique and the nuance of growing and producing and appreciating this plant without programs like this, in my opinion. If we're not elevating the voice of these these legends of the industry, then we're going to eventually lose this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it depends where you are, like everything, but the real truth, and people are shocked when they hear me say this, is the vast majority of the cannabis on the legal marketplace is garbage. It's really low quality product. And nobody knows that because they don't understand what quality is in cannabis. And so that's okay. It's just it's the maturity of the market. It's where we are, but that's the point. The point is that people are, learning that Bud Light is Chardonnay, or whatever. I mean, I'm clearly not a drinker, but I'm a cannabis person. But it's like that would be mocked so hard if I was watching that right now. My point is, though, most people don't realize that most of what they're consuming is pretty low quality, and not everywhere. There's plenty of pockets that have good quality cannabis, but if we don't educate people about that, then the bad product becomes what people know and understand, and they don't demand anymore. They don't look for any better. They don't bring those craft people up anyways. And so I think this is one of the main reasons why the council signed on. Is it's important to protect the craft.
Yes.
This is all about quality. It's all about quality. Quality is all about what Ganjier is trying to make sure the world understands. And so, yeah, it's good for the craft community. It's good for the connoisseur community. And ultimately, it's really important that the larger and the smaller companies get it, because there will always be a rabid fan base for quality cannabis. Always. It's always going to exist. And so we need to expand it and serve it, and then really show people what's possible,
Absolutely. So the program kicks off in January.
Yeah. So the only thing that's stressful about this at the moment is that there's a live training component in Ganjier as well. 2-day hands-on training. People like Kevin Jodrey and those will be there to actually like work with you in person. It's going to be so cool. But because of COVID, we've got pretty severe limitations for what we think we can do in 2021. So right now, we only think we're going to be able to put 156 people through the program in 2021. So we're going to open up applications, towards till the end we're going to open up applications in January, right? And kind of accept the first class by the end of January. And that's when we'll kind of start the process. And then we have the live training and there's all this other stuff that happens after that. But so end of January is when it kind of kicks off, but everybody should go to ganjier.com and get on the interest list, because we're going to have limited availability for this first one.
Okay, so if someone is interested in doing this, what kind of a time commitment are we talking about? And what's the length of the program?
Well, so the online part of the training is working out to be roughly about 50 hours of content. So there's 50 hours of digesting the content. That, like I said, the live training is 2 days. And then in between that period, you're going to want to practice a lot. There's a lot of practice assessment that has to happen using the tool. And so, we don't know at this moment. I mean, it's a real question mark how hard people will have to practice to make sure that they can pass. But if I look at how much time, it's probably going to take, another, gosh, it's funny now that I'm reflecting, it's going to take a few hundred sessions at least to get to a place where you really have developed more of a palate. So, it's not a terrible thing to do. You're spending all of your time assessing cannabis, but you're going to have to do it hundreds of times. So there's that part of it. And then there's the exam, which we won't start doing the exams until the end of 2021. Those will also be in person. So, I don't know. It's a fairly meaty commitment. I don't know, it's hundreds of hours, I'm sure.
All right. That's good information. So as you're sifting through the applications in January, what are the qualifications that you're looking for?
I mean, we're just going to try to make it a really well-rounded class. I think that's the current thinking is, one, we'll have to see, we've got 3,400 people on the interest list right now. And so We'll have to see who actually, comes in and submits their applications. So my point is, I know that the plan right now is to make it well-rounded. And that really observes, looking at a full diversity, full inclusion, full, landscape of different kinds of people to really make it diverse and inclusive. How we do that, I can't tell you yet. We'll have to go through the exercise of doing it when all the applications come in, and then we'll, communicate how it turned out.
Yeah. Well, I just think about this when, someone who gets this certification, if only 156 people will potentially get it by the end of 2021, because, everyone may not graduate. This will be like having Willy Wonka's golden ticket to get whatever cannabis job you want.
I've already got companies telling me now that they would like to be first in line to hire the first set of Ganjiers if they're available. And these will be people that'll get the upper echelon of wages in the cannabis industry. And so it's exciting, it's creating a new category. This is a new category that we've been developing over these last few years that the whole industry is ready for. Everybody's ready for a better trained master of cannabis service, somebody that's really playing at that level of sophistication and quality. And they'll be equipped with really great tools to play that role with integrity. So I'm excited. It's been a long time in the making. It's been hard to keep it a secret. It's been a lot of work, but it sure is fun. And I think that I keep saying, everybody in the Ganjier project, we call this our 100-year project because we foundationally believe that this will still be in existence in 100 years servicing the cannabis industry. So we've tried to really build it with that kind of intention in mind.
Beautiful. I've had people ask me before, what kind of qualifications or certifications I have. And I'm like, I started this before that existed. So I'm like, mine is just life. It has been my school.
Being in it. It's experience, though.
Yeah.
That's the point. You either have experience in cannabis, which is valuable. Experience in cannabis is really valuable right now. But that actually is a very small category of the world. That the most people that are asking the question, they don't have any experience in cannabis. So that's why the education is so important. People that have experience will oftentimes kind of sound off against like, why do you need this? And we say to them, you might not need this. If you already have this knowledge and wisdom, God bless you. Like, we're supportive of people that have got that experience playing a big role in this industry. It's just that that's only like 5% of who's actually coming in and trying to play in the industry. So for everybody else, you need the certifications and the training.
Absolutely. Totally. So let's say, someone wants to see cannabis education be added to the universities and colleges around them. How, do you recommend, how do you recommend people asking or moving that forward or trying to push for that sort of change in their areas?
I mean, I think going to the schools, the schools are about serving the community. That's really, if you think about what a school is, it's an educational destination for most of their local community, right? And then sometimes if you pay a lot more, other people from outside communities can come in, right? But it's about serving the local community. So ultimately, it's the same thing actually in all aspects of cannabis, whether it's regulations or whether it's higher education or whether it's anything. It's really about just people voicing this is what they want, and making sure their voices are heard. And that is why cannabis is having such a great moment. There's a lot of voices, yelling from the rooftops that this is good. So my general feeling in any capacity, whether it's the medical side or the higher ed side or the regulatory side or any other side, just get involved and be a voice, because when you do that, just like you've discovered, you're a voice. It attracts a lot of great things. It puts you in the center of exciting things, and it's good. It actually has a lot of value. And so people just need to, get more involved.
Yeah, rattle cages. That's what I say. It's mostly starting locally, rattling local cages to get things changed up in your own communities. I mean, sometimes I think people either, slept through government class, or they don't quite remember that, who we put as president has less effect on us as who we put as our city council and our mayors.
1,000,000%. Like, I wish I mean, that's not true. I love being as busy as I am at Green Flower, but like I'm in Ventura County, which is this place between Los Angeles and Santa Barbara. And Ventura County has been super, super conservative around cannabis. They've been very much like the part of California that's like, no, not here. We don't want it. And then boom, all of a sudden there's this flip change and they're going to issue like 40 licenses, and all of a sudden there's going to be this like crazy economic opportunity out here for people. And I think that's just the point. It's like you need people that are going to be supportive. You need a lot of voices that are going to keep shouting and screaming about it, because that was one of the things about Ventura. We had a lot of good patient advocates, consumer advocates, people that have made their voices heard and they've talked about it. And I think there was a shift in local governance as well. And all of a sudden, and then boom, the whole thing kind of opens right up. So that's the kind of thing that's happening everywhere, but it's happening so localized, right? So it's true, we shouldn't get distracted by all the big headlines. You should get really super, super, super local with what's happening, around you or close by you, because that's where the opportunity is.
Absolutely. Well, Max, is there anything that I didn't ask you that we might need to round out the conversation before we wrap?
No, I think I always tell people, because we just went live with this, that if you want to get started in a free way, we've now got a whole series of free courses on Green Flower. So if people just go right to the homepage of green-flower.com, there's a way, it just tells you, do you want a business course, or do you want a cultivation course, or, whatever it is. And then you can get this kind of sequence of free courses. So it's a good way to get started. It's fun. It shows you the value of what we've done. So I always encourage people to use that feature. No, that's it. I really appreciate being here with you today.
Yeah, this has been fun. And Danielle sent me over a discount and a discount code. So I'm going to say,
awesome.
Yeah. So a 50% discount on any of the educational programs at green-flower.com. And your code is Max sent me 50.
Oh, that's great. All right, good.
I'll add that in the
I'll take it.
But yeah, it's really great to start with the free stuff, feel it out, and then, purchase the class that feels like, what you need to.
Oh man, people will use that. There's so much good stuff on Green Flower. So yeah, that's good. I'm glad that we did that.
Yeah, totally. I had a feeling you had no idea. So, well, thank you so much for your time today, Max. Happy holidays to you. And I hope, your wife is feeling better soon, and good luck on baby number 2.
Thanks so much. Well, we should do this again sometime.
Yes, totally.